Hi, it's Will back with more of Grand Duke Dmitri's diaries. Today we have the 7th, 8th, and 9th of February 1906, and we'll see if we can get through all three of them. They're relatively long ones. Okay, I'd like to just remark that I have another series called Life on the Magic Mountain, which is about the famous Thomas Mann novel and what life in Davos, Switzerland during the sanatorium era was actually like, and also specifically about the sanatorium where Dmitri ended up in 1939 and where he died in 1942. So you can find those on YouTube if you're interested. And I also would like to express my gratitude today to four men who really were so impactful on my development as a historian of Russia and the imperial family. And unfortunately, three of the four of them are now deceased. So one was Prince Paul Ilyinsky, Dmitri's son, and another was Prince David Chavchavadze, who was the grandson of Grand Duke George Mikhailovich, and then Prince Emmanuel Golitsyn in London, famous for having been a dashing Spitfire pilot during the Second World War, and finally Philip Goodman, my great friend and my godmother's husband, who is still alive and kicking in his 90s in London, and both of them all four of them gave me so much encouragement and information and support in my path to becoming a historian of Imperial Russia. And nowadays, in this phase of my life, I also have two mentors who are giving me much to my gratitude, support, and guidance. So Pius Opp in Switzerland and his cousin Larry Opp in the U.S., in the state of Indiana. So I salute all six of those gentlemen and thank them from the bottom of my heart. So now let's move on to the diaries themselves, and we begin with 7th February. Okay, I got a lot of abuse from GM today for saying that his question annoyed me a lot, but he was a little wrong too. He claims that I said his question was stupid. I did not say that. And then it seems he exaggerated a little, saying that Aunt said I was rude. So, then he suddenly got angry that I said his question annoyed me. He's never gotten angry at that kind of remark before, but that isn't exactly good either. We had lunch at Aunt Alex's. Andre was there. I ate a frightful number of blini. They were very good. Lent is coming up, and I have to admit that it's quite a bore. It's strange, though. I'm always bored at the beginning and then indifferent. I'm learning how to make a net. It's very amusing. Tomorrow there's a dinner for the Pavlovsky Regiment. I'm not going, that's clear, but I am having tea at Aunt Alex's. I've gotten addicted to Sherlock Holmes. The stories are very interesting, but not literature. In the afternoon, we skated in the halls. It's great fun. You go so fast, and when the parquet is uneven, you jump and dance so much that it seems you're about to fly, which is very dangerous. GM is in a frenzy and is driving me to bed. I have to go. It's 10 o'clock. All right. So What do we have today? We have the beginning of this really tense period between Dmitri and George Mikhailovich Laiming. And Aunt said I was rude. I don't know which aunt it was, whether it was Aunt Ella or Aunt Alex, the Empress, but apparently the whole incident had to do with Dmitri making a comment about something that Laiming asked, and saying that he was annoyed by that question, or even perhaps that it was a stupid question, although he claims that he never did say that. So unfortunately, he doesn't tell us what the question was. Okay, so he goes to lunch, and or dinner, lunch at Aunt Alex's, not at Uncle Nicky's. He's calling it Aunt Alex's. And Andrei was there. So Andrei was Grand Duke Andrei Vladimirovich. And he was Dmitri's cousin. He was the son of Grand Duke Paul's brother. So Dmitri's father and Andrei's father were brothers. And they were cousins. And Andrei was a young man at that time. A young Grand Duke, and he was probably on duty at the palace as a Fliegel adjutant. And beyond that, Dmitri doesn't make any comment. Okay, I ate a frightful number of blini. Well, that made me laugh, because the same thing in his adult diaries. He rarely talked about food, and it doesn't seem to have been a central part of his existence, eating or cooking or anything like that, as it is for some people. But blini he always loved. He always loved, and whenever he is served blini, he always talks in his diaries about eating a ton of them. Okay, so Lent is coming. Lent is in the Orthodox Church. Then as now, Lent means fasting. So the fasting rules, at least in the Greek Orthodox Church that I belong to, are that you give up, of course, meat, but not just meat. You also give up oil, so olive oil or anything like that, and that can definitely make things difficult. So not everybody does that. I usually don't do that. That's really the strict fast, is to give up both meat and oil. And wine, you're allowed to have beer, because the monastics used to consider beer a staple, like bread and a food. But it can be very difficult. It can be very difficult to do that for, 40 days. All right, so another regimental dinner that Dmitri seems resigned to the fact that he's not going to it. That's all right. At least he gets to go to tea at Aunt Alex's. And I like his comment that Sherlock Holmes stories are very interesting, but not literature. And that certainly is the case, and it's rather precocious of him, and I like it that he is making this distinction between literature and books written for entertainment. Okay, and the skating, one of the advantages, I guess, to living is in a palace and having so much space. So the we, I think, must mean himself and Maria, maybe Borya as well. It does sound as though it was rather dangerous. GM is in a frenzy. All right, so this isn't the normal, hey, you need to go to bed. This is, GM is, the tension is there between the two of them. So, okay, let's go on to the 8th of February. We took a walk in the morning, then we had lessons. We had lunch at home because arithmetic starts early. I didn't do as well today as last time because I didn't know the geometrical theorem. I had tea at Aunt Alex's. I brought my revolver there and squirted the children and even the sovereign and empress. It was great fun. The children were completely soaked. Maria and Miss June have gone to the dinner. Maria was very displeased that Miss J was going to the dinner because she was afraid they'd be seated together at the same table. I dined alone with GM and had some not very interesting conversations about aeronautics, the North Pole, and that sort of thing. And I got a little slap from GM for squirting my revolver at him. I intend to get up early tomorrow to get all my lessons ready in the morning, and then I'll have the afternoon quite free. Oh, joy. It's 9:30. Okay, so he usually went to bed between 9:30 and 11, but I think they wanted him to go to bed at 10 usually. So the squirt gun, he calls it the revolver. I've never seen a squirt gun that was designed to look like a revolver, but I think this is just another word for, in this case, for pistol or gun. So the squirt gun becomes its own thing in the next few diary entries. And he's delighted with it, and he is bringing it with him everywhere, and he's getting in a certain amount of trouble with it. And this is an instance where it seems he was a little young for his age, a little immature for his age, for a 14-year-old. So he brings it, and he soaks the four girls, and he shoots a stream of water at the sovereign. So the sovereign is Gasudar in Russian, and it's very often translated as emperor. I do that myself, but what it actually means is sovereign. But people don't usually use the word sovereign in English, so that can be a bit awkward. And he even squirts Alexandra, the empress, and she was a woman who rarely smiled and tended to be very sort of grave, and so it's surprising that he squirted her as well, and apparently that was all right. She didn't get upset, or else I think he would have noted it. Okay, so Maria's off at the dinner with Miss June, and we talked a little once before about how Miss June seemed terribly keen on actually going to these events that the children went to and sort of being treated like a member of the family. And in this instance, she apparently succeeded, although Maria was just hoping that she wouldn't have to sit next to her. They wouldn't be at the same table. And yeah, just as we mentioned before, the Laimings did not seem to have that same wish to be included in events that members of the imperial family were included in. So there's this charming scene at the dinner table, Dmitri eating alone with George Laiming, and he's probably a little upset still that he wasn't included in the regimental dinner. And Laiming wants to talk about aeronautics and the North Pole and things that, you know, I mean, Dmitri probably would have been interested in at another time. The sort of adventurous things that boys that age tend to like. But this time, no. So I can just picture him sitting there, and as George Laiming is developing these topics, suddenly taking out his squirt gun, which he should not have had at the dinner table, and actually shooting George with a stream of water. And then what does Laiming do? He slaps him. A little slap, but still, when I read that, it surprised me. You know, I don't know how what the rules were for interactions between a Grand Duke and his tutors, or his sort of overall mentor and overseer. I remember from once a Grand Duke that Grand Duke Alexander Mikhailovich Sandro said that the men who were teaching him and his brothers, he had several brothers, were not allowed to hit them, that only their father was allowed to hit them. So they were indeed meted out corporal punishment, but not from their teachers. But it sounds like this was a pretty minor thing, with a little slap, as Dmitri says. So I think then, yes, we have time for the 9th. We just went for a ride with Uncle Nicky. It was a lot of fun. I was really clowning around, pretending to vomit. Everyone laughed a lot. In the afternoon, there was a little incident with MN. I was completely to blame because I said something nasty to MN about GM. She was offended and wasn't going to read to us until GM persuaded her. Of course, she shouldn't have told him what I said. At dinner at that palace, they were talking about the train wreck in Borky. It was terrible. Yesterday, I squirted the children with my revolver. It was really funny. They were soaked. Miss June has a sore throat, which began yesterday, and now she is lying on the sofa completely limp, poor thing. I, too, have had a sore throat since yesterday, but I didn't tell anyone until today when I told GM. He gave me hydrogen peroxide, which is really helping. Tomorrow will be very interesting, i.e., phoo. How Ramali I am. It's a good thing there are no lessons tomorrow or the day after, 10:15. So he was up a little later that night. And yes, good old Dmitri playing the clown as a child and also very often as an adult, pretending to throw up with Uncle Nicky, and it was well received. Everyone laughed a lot, is what he says. So, but then, the day didn't really end on a high note, because GM is George Mikhailovich and MN is Maria Nikolaevna Laiming. So they were married and had little Borya. So apparently Dmitri was injudicious enough to confide his frustrations to Maria Nikolaevna, to complain to her about her husband, George. And he didn't do it in an acceptable way. He said something nasty is the way he puts it. So she was so offended that she was not going to read to them that night. And that's something that we'll encounter as the diary entries go on, that a lot of times what Maria and Dmitri were reading, they weren't reading themselves. They were being read to in the evening. The Sherlock Holmes books, Dmitri is reading himself. But part of their routine was that they sat in the evening and somebody read to them, and apparently Maria Nikolaevna was one of the people, or maybe even the main person who did that. But she was going to punish Dmitri by not reading that evening, or if not punish him, that at least she was so offended that she just didn't want to do it. Okay, so dinner at that palace. So he has started referring to the Alexander Palace, where Nicholas and Alexander live, as that palace. I don't know why, but at dinner, the conversation was about the train wreck in Borky, and that was something that had happened quite a long time ago, almost 20 years before this, in 1888, when Alexander III was still Tsar, and he was traveling with his family and children, and the train, I think, jumped the track or something. There was a train wreck. It was not any kind of attack or revolutionary attempt to kill the Tsar, but it was indeed a disastrous train wreck, and ultimately 23 people ended up dying, including 21 on the spot. The other two were died from their injuries later. So that would indeed have been a horrible thing. I don't know. I should have looked to see if it was the anniversary of that event and if that's why Nicholas and Alexandra were talking about it. Okay, so he talks about the incident of the day before. He's still delighted with the whole squirt gun thing, with him getting the four little Grand Duchesses soaked. And he is a little more sympathetic in this instance to Miss June than Maria usually was. He calls her poor thing, and that, I suppose it could have been sarcastic, but it doesn't seem to be. She had a sore throat, he had a sore throat. Apparently there was some bug going around, and this use of this word poor thing is something he uses very commonly throughout his diaries. Okay, so he tells GM about the sore throat, and GM treats it himself as a parent would. You know, if it wasn't serious enough to call in a doctor, then the parent gives the child, as we all know, cough syrup or whatever it is that's needed. So another instance, of how much George and Maria Laiming were the parents in this household. The word Romilly is a French word, and I would translate it, if I were to translate it, as muddle-headed, but usually I don't translate it. So I'm not sure why he's feeling muddle-headed, maybe just because of this bug he has, and he's glad there are no lessons tomorrow. And yeah, that's it. So the whole issue with GM, with George Laiming, just gets worse in the next few diary entries. And in fact, he starts his diary entry of the 10th by saying, "This is a troubled time for me." So we will get into that next time. Thanks, as always, for watching. Okay, bye.